Welcome back to our weekly update. I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and this time around we have a special video for you. As we close out 2023, we're going to count down our 5 most popular videos of the year. These interviews were our most viewed over the last 12 months, and they include experts' thoughts on gold, silver, and much more. Let's take a look at what they had to say. Kicking off the list in the 5th spot is Jeff Clark of thegoldadvisor.com. I spoke with Jeff at the New Orleans Investment Conference in November, and his comments about the 100-year opportunity potentially shaping up in the junior resource sector struck a chord with investors. Here's why Jeff thinks these major gains could be coming.
I think that for any stock you don't own that you like right now that may be dramatically oversold, I know people are tired of hearing the word opportunity, but I do think, think cycle. That's another thing I would like to point out, not to keep rattling on here, but gold stocks and mining stocks cycle. And I have a chart in that presentation. When the video comes out, you'll see that, mining stocks oversell dramatically, 50, 60, 70%. And one example was 90%. But the next upcycle more than made up for it. The one that sold off 90%, the next upturn was over 500% gain. So these things cycle. We've been in a down cycle. Sentiment is bad, but at some point this is going to reverse and we're going to have an upcycle in gold. And I think the gains in the miners, especially the juniors, are going to be frankly spectacular.
Chris Vermeulen of thetechnicaltraders.com is next. I heard from him just after gold reached a new all-time high, and he outlined what he thinks will come next for the precious metal.
In 2024, I do think we're going to see the economy roll over. We're going to probably see a big correction in the stock market. It's going to create massive selling across most asset classes. And as the stock market sells off, it'll probably pull gold back down, just like we saw in the 2008 bear market. Gold pulled down about 34%. And so if you notice, this pullback that we had in 2008 is really just the halfway point. And then gold continued to take off after that. So I feel as though this is going to be something very similar. Gold might end up muscling its way up, moving higher for a few months, but I do think it will be under pressure in due time, just because of the way the economy and the stock market, there'll be a financial reset. But when we look at it from a big standpoint picture, we can look at using Fibonacci extension, we can look at the upside targets. Eventually, I think we're going to see gold reach about $2,500, $2,600, $2,700 to the upside based on just this recent rally, this consolidation, and then eventually I think it's going to head higher.
E.B. Tucker of the Tucker Letter is always a popular guest, and in a mid-October conversation, he gave his outlook for gold for the next 90 days. At the time, the yellow metal was at $19.24 per ounce, and his prediction was for a move to $21.50 or $2200. Gold has already briefly hit the lower end of that range, and there's no telling what 2024 may bring. Here's how EB laid out his thoughts.
I personally think, right now, let's see, this moment, 1924, we had a big day on Friday. I personally think that the gold price is set to move 10%. I think that it's going to, 2150, maybe up to 2200 in the next 90 days. And I think that because what we saw recently was we saw all the indicators that show the same move that we saw in 2018, early 16. We saw this huge dip down that didn't make any sense on high volume, and then an immediate back to where it started. And usually when we see that, we know that the downside is over. And it's really tough for gold with high interest rates. A couple of years ago, you would have said, what happens when interest rates go to 5? You'd be like, gold does not do it, it doesn't move. You would have definitely said that, right? Because that historically, the correlation is that the gold price moves opposite of interest rates. But what are we seeing? Gold is held in there pretty well. 1925, okay, so we're flat for 3 years, but interest rates went from 0 to 5.5. Wow, that's pretty crazy. And in every other currency except the dollar, it's at an all-time high. So, I mean, look for 10%. Let's look for 10% by the spring. How about that? And then you can have me on and throw tomatoes if I'm wrong.
Gareth Soloway of verifiedinvesting.com comes in at number 2, and he looked further into the future, sharing his thoughts on what the best performing asset of 2024 will be. With a recession in the cards and inflation looking sticky, he selected gold as his pick.
I'm in the camp that I do think that we do see a recession in 2024, and we also see inflation still sticking around 3%, maybe 2.8, maybe 3.1, but somewhere around there, which again is going to make the expectations for all these rate cuts very, very tricky, especially if we have a recession, because again, it's all about, can the Fed cut rates enough to stimulate without causing inflation to surge back? And with all the money, and again, this is pretty incredible, but when COVID occurred, the money supply in the U.S. went up 40% increase in money supply. And we've only subtracted a small portion of that out via Fed tightening. And so there's still a lot of money in the system, but if that ever does kind of get taken out, then you do have the recipe for major downside on some of these stocks. So I'm going to go with gold again. Again, I don't know how much it'll be up. And like you said, it's hard to predict out 12 months. My most accurate calls are, 1 to 2 weeks out where the charts are just lining perfectly. But let's go with it. Gold all the way, baby.
Finally, our most popular interview of 2023 was with none other than Doug Casey of internationalman.com. I had a chance to hear from Doug not long after the banking crisis swept through the U.S., and he gave his thoughts on how to navigate the Greater Depression that he sees coming. Here's the advice he shared with investors.
I think in light of that, what you have to do is learn how to speculate, which is an art in itself, very different from gambling, different from investing. So that's a different subject. That's one thing. I think you're wise to accumulate a lot of gold and silver coins in your own possession. It's real wealth that you can put your hands on, not just digital. Diversify internationally, farmland. Like at the moment, I'm on a farm in Uruguay, a small farm by South American standards, only 1,000 acres, but it's nice. So I've got cattle and pigs and chicken and a couple miles of river and ponds with fish, stuff like that. So, yeah, I think that's a good idea, having that. Makes me feel good. And I like being in the country. I don't like being in the cities now. I think the cities could become rather wild and woolly in the future. Could be like the BLM days of a couple of years ago during the height of the COVID hysteria on steroids. So, yeah, I like the idea of being in a rural area with kind of rural-oriented people who are used to working with their hands and dealing with reality as opposed to digits.
You can find the links to the full interviews with Doug Casey, Gareth Soloway, E.B. Tucker, Chris Vermeulen, and Jeff Clark in the video description if you'd like to hear more. That's all for this week. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a comment below. We'll see you next time.